How many of you out there are just like me and you love the flavor of cinnamon and sugar? Anything doused, rolled, sprinkled, baked in cinnamon and sugar, I am here for it, especially when it's a churro. So you're gonna love what we make today because we're gonna make a churro bundt cake topped with a chocolate ganache glaze. Ugh, it is so good that it's sinful. Coming up here next on The Sweet Spot. The first thing we need to do to make our churro bundt cake batter is take our flour and all of our dry ingredients. So we're gonna add our baking powder, all of that baking powder, our salt, and one of our magic ingredients, which is that cinnamon. So we're gonna add all of that cinnamon into there. And what I do also, I add a little bit of nutmeg. I find that a little bit of nutmeg really pumps up that cinnamon flavor and adds that little spicy note. So we're gonna add a little nutmeg in there. And all I'm gonna do is take my spatula and just blend this until it's all combined. My dry ingredients are all combined, so we're gonna sit these aside for a little later because we're gonna move on to starting to make our churro batter. So the first thing we need to add is our butter. And we're gonna pre-cream the butter. You can go ahead and cream your butter along with your sugar. I like to first beat out my butter to make it nice and smooth and then add my sugar. So I'm gonna get my paddle attachment onto my mixer, mix this out on medium until it's nice and smooth. Okay, so my butter's all nice and smooth. It's time to add my sugar. So first I'm gonna add my granulated sugar and my brown sugar. And I'm just gonna kind of chop up my brown sugar because sometimes when your brown sugar is sitting out in a bowl, it loves to clump up. So if I just break it up a little bit, that prevents those brown sugar clumps from forming in the batter. So if you feel your brown sugar is doing that, just take a spatula and chop it up and loosen it up so that it doesn't clump together once you start to beat it into the butter. And then we're gonna beat this on medium until it's nice and combined and start adding our eggs. All right, so our sugar and butter is all combined and creamed together. I scrape down the sides of the bowl just so everything stays off the bottom and mixes really well. It's time to blend in our eggs. I'm going to do these 2 at a time, so you'll do 3 rotations because there's 5 eggs, so it'll be 2, 2, and 1. So let's add the first 2 to the mixture. And we're gonna blend that on medium until they're combined. You really want your eggs to blend in nicely so that once you get this bundt cake in the oven, you get a nice lift with those eggs and butter. So I take my time to blend them in sections instead of all at once. Once again, on medium to medium low until they get nice and smooth. Add in 2 more. Then we just have 1 to go. All right, our final egg is going in, and once this is blended, we'll continue with the rest of our ingredients, and it's almost time to load all of this delicious batter into our bundt pan. All of my eggs have been fully incorporated into my batter, so we're gonna move on to our sour cream. So you're gonna add your sour cream in there. I like to use a spatula because I don't like to waste any of my ingredients left behind in my bowl. Just a little bit more. Zero waste into our batter. And then we're gonna add our vanilla. You're gonna mix this on medium. You only need probably about 30 to 60 seconds. And this will be combined, and then we'll move on to adding our milk and our flour. All right, so this is when the magic happens because you're starting to add the flour. Now we're gonna rotate these in. You can do thirds or you can do halves. I like to do a half because my batter base is loose enough to where the flour won't make it too thick if I do it in 2 segments. If you find your base is a little thicker, not as loose, you might want to do it in a third. But we're gonna add half of this flour mixture to our mixing bowl. and just get it in there. It smells so great because that cinnamon and nutmeg are inside of that flour. And as you push it into the bowl, you can smell those spices in there. And then we're gonna mix this on medium-low or medium, depending on your mixture, until it's nice and combined. I don't wanna over whip it, but I want it to have enough traction. All right, so we've combined our first rotation of flour. One thing that's very important on this step is scraping down the sides and the bottom of your bowl, making sure there's no butter sticking to the bottom, because you can get clumps of butter and sugar sticking to the bottom during this step. So we're gonna add half of that whole milk into the mixture. And we're gonna blend that also on a medium to medium-low until that's combined. All right, so I'm gonna add all of that remaining flour into my mixing bowl. And then once we add the remaining milk, it's time to get this all into our Bundt pan and then into our oven. Because the fun part is coating this with the cinnamon and sugar coating. So blend this on medium, and then we're gonna do our last rotation. We're gonna add our last bit of milk and on medium. My churro batter is done. It's ready to go into my Bundt pan. A few things. First, you want to preset your oven to 350 degrees. Next, you want to butter and flour your Bundt pan. This is a very important step, because if your Bundt pan is not effectively or properly buttered and floured, your Bundt cake will not release. It won't come out clean. It may stick to the sides of the pan or break apart. This is a really important step to making sure you get a very clean release on your Bundt cake. To fill the pan, I don't pour because I don't want the batter to end up all along the sides of the pan. I want a nice smooth layer. So I take a ladle and I scoop it in around. It helps me really control where the batter goes, how much batter goes into it at a time, to where I could get as even and as smooth as a layer if I want. If you like to pour, feel free. This is just a step I use to make sure I get the batter nice and smooth. It does take a little bit more time, but I find when loading your Bundt pan, patience can be key so that you get the batter exactly where you want it to go, inside the pan and not all over the sides and edges of the pan, because then you could get like burned cake all over the side of the pan. It's just not pretty. So I'm gonna fill this and then we're gonna get this into the oven. All of my batter is now in my Bundt pan. I just shake it a little bit and kind of twist it. That helps the batter smooth out a little bit more in the pan. A Bundt cake batter is gonna be a little bit, or sometimes much thicker than the cake batter. So scooping it in might work better. But I do like to wiggle it to smooth it out so that I get as much of an even layer as I can. So now we're gonna put this in the oven. We're gonna bake this anywhere from 50 to 60 minutes. The reason I say anywhere from 50 to 60 minutes, because if you've been baking Bundt cakes, you already know they're temperamental. Sometimes they're done in 50 minutes, sometimes they want to stay in the heat a little longer. So I always say give it a range. Set your timer for 50 minutes. If you need to let it sit in it 5 minutes longer or 10 minutes longer until it's completely done, that's normal. Take a skewer and check several different parts of a Bundt cake. Another thing with a Bundt cake is that you may find that it's completely cooked in one area, and if you don't check the other, that area may still be a little bit under baked. So do several pokes into your cake when you're checking it. But set for 50 minutes and don't be surprised if you have to set in increments of 2 minutes going forward just to make sure it's completely done. So I'm gonna pop this in the oven, get it baked so that we can move on to topping it with that oh so good cinnamon and sugar layer. So now that my cake is fully baked, I've also let it rest for at least 10 to 20 minutes to cool down slightly. I'm now going to invert my Bundt pan onto a cooling rack. It's gonna let my Bundt cake slowly release, but also allowing it to cool and keep its shape. So it's a very simple process. My Bundt pan's a little warm. It's not like extremely hot. So you just take your rack, put it on top, flip your Bundt pan, and I heard it release as soon as I flipped it, and you'll be able to see how clean it came out of the pan. It smells amazing. As you can see, it looks amazing, but it's not done. It needs that coating of cinnamon and sugar. So because I'm gonna use butter to adhere that cinnamon and sugar, I don't want a hot cake because the butter will never actually set up. The cinnamon and sugar will just kind of glide off. So we're gonna let this completely cool. So I'm gonna let it sit out for another 45 minutes to an hour, and then we're gonna come back and do that cinnamon and sugar all over this cake. My cake has completely cooled. It smells amazing. I need to invent something called smell-o-vision because you need to smell how the cinnamon is just coming off of the cake, and it smells amazing. It's hard for me to finish because I just want to cut a slice and eat into it, but we have a couple of more things to do. I have my melted butter here, I have my cinnamon and my sugar, because it's now time to create that iconic cinnamon sugar coating that churros have onto our bundt cake. So taking just a brush here, I'm gonna brush generously all over my bundt cake with that melted butter. This is the glue for our cinnamon sugar, so you want to make sure you get a good coating of butter on top of your cake, because everywhere we have that butter, we should have some cinnamon sugar adhering to our cake. Now, I do it in sections just so I can make sure all of my cinnamon and sugar get onto the cake. I don't want that butter to melt or absorb too quickly into the bundt cake to where it's dried out. So I'm just gonna do pretty much half of the cake with that butter, and then take the cinnamon sugar and just like press it in on top. And if you notice, I am just slathering this cake with butter because I want a good coating of cinnamon sugar all around my cake. And I want enough butter to where there's extra just laying on top, ready for that cinnamon and that sugar. All right, so we have our butter there. So what I'm gonna do is just step to this side, take your granulated sugar, your cinnamon, and just mix it together. I'm just taking a spoon, and I'm just gonna combine those together, create that nice coating. A good tool you can use is just like a sifter. I'm going to use a little bit of that. Sometimes all the sugar doesn't get through because sugar is real heavy. So it'll help me get the top. Or you can just take your spoon and just sprinkle it. And you're gonna have to take your hands and press it in. So you have to use your hands on this because that cinnamon and that sugar is so heavy, and you want it to kind of like hold on with that butter. So just kind of press it in and sprinkle it across. The reason why I have it on a cooling rack with a pan underneath is because a lot of my cinnamon and sugar filling is gonna fall through the bottom on that pan. If I run out of my bowl, I have the overflow that I can use to make sure I get the rest of my cake coated. My cake is completely smothered in cinnamon and sugar. Oh, just the way I like it. So you can see my bundt cake looks like a churro with that beautiful cinnamon and sugar coating. Now what we're gonna do is add a chocolate glaze, and I'm gonna show you how to make a quick chocolate glaze. Instead of doing a traditional ganache with heating cream on the stove, I actually microwaved my cream for about 1 minute and 10 seconds. You're gonna watch it. If you start to see it bubble, because if you microwave cream too long, it'll bubble over and you'll have a mess. So as it starts to bubble, you know it's ready. So I'm going to add my cream to my chocolate and start whisking to melt down that chocolate and create a nice, smooth chocolate glaze. So, perfect. My chocolate is all melted down. We're gonna put my whisk over there. And now we're just gonna take a spoon and just kind of glaze that chocolate over top of the cake and let it run down and do what it would like to do. Because usually with churros, what do? You get a caramel or a chocolate dipping sauce. So this just gives that same kind of feel as if the churro, you were dipping a churro in a chocolate or caramel sauce. And just give it a nice glaze. And I'm just gonna finish smoothing this out all the way around until I get a nice chocolate coating across the top, so we have that added flavor of chocolate. You could even make a little extra, put it aside, and when you get ready to slice into your cake, you can just put a little extra chocolate sauce on top, or you can spice it up with a little cayenne pepper, just like not even 1/4 of a teaspoon will give it that little kick. So we're just gonna finish this up and then we're gonna slice into our Churro Bundt Cake. So here you have it, our Churro Bundt Cake with a chocolate glaze. And as you can see, my chocolate is all set up. I am ready to slice a piece of this cake and see what it looks like. So I'm gonna go ahead and slice into it. Oh, and I can hear the crackle of the sugar and cinnamon. Let's just take a little slice out here. Look at that. It looks so good. So now here's the taste test. And I'm gonna do a side where I can get some of that chocolate. I am speechless. That is so good. The cake is light and you get that hint of that cinnamon churro flavor, just like biting into a churro where you have that light dough with that hard crust around the outside encased in cinnamon and sugar, and you're dipping it in some nice melted chocolate. It's that same experience you get right here. Thank you for joining me. Come back and see me. Hit like, subscribe, come back, more to see right here on The Sweet Spot.